Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, folks, Big Paul here today with another Anabolic Q&A. I haven't done one of these in a while. I figured it was time to pick these back up again. I've been focusing on the podcast and doing other stuff. But I have a bunch of cool questions today, and we're going to dig into all those in just 1 second. All right, first question we have here today is from Jerome Pierce 6423. Jerome asks, what did your anxiety feel like on NPP or Deca? I get extreme anxiety on NPP, but not as bad with Deca. For some reason, when they are ran at the same time in weekly dosages. Any way to combat the anxiety. I don't think he means he's running them at the same time, but I get what he's saying. That there's a difference with the anxiety between NPP and Deca. I would bet that the anxiety is the same, but what's happening with NPP versus Deca at the same doses, NPP is going to hit a lot faster. You're at peak concentration probably within a week with NPP because of the way the drug builds up with the shorter ester. So within 4 to 5 days, you're going to be at peak blood levels with the NPP. So the anxiety is going to hit you faster. Whereas with Deca, it has a longer ester, and you're probably talking somewhere between 30 to 45 days before it to peak. And maybe the gradual increase doesn't cause the anxiety, or it does happen, but it just happens later on. So I don't know if maybe tapering up the NPP would work better for you. That's an idea. But there's some mechanisms at play here. Nandrolone studies have shown that nandrolone might react on the brain through an interaction with neurosteroids. And the studies have shown that it has a significant binding affinity for both the NMDA and sigma receptors in the brain. It can be displaced from both sides. The study I found online showed that you can displace some of this with supplementing DHEA, and pregnenolone, HCG, can help alleviate some of that, or may potentially alleviate some of those side effects. So that's an idea there. I have not tried that. I don't know if it makes a difference or not. What did my anxiety feel like when I was on NPP or Deca when I had it? I never used to get anxiety with nandrolone. I used to run a ton of nandrolone when I was younger. No issues. Once in a while, some sex drive and impotence issues, but never had anxiety. And I don't know if something changed in my brain chemistry over the last 1.5 to 2 years. But I had this just severe, I guess social anxiety would be the best way to describe it. Like when I'm around other people, sometimes I would feel overwhelmed. And I had a couple panic attacks. I think it was last year after my contest. When running NPP, I definitely got very panicky, and I had some really pretty bad anxiety with it. So here's my thought process. If it doesn't agree with you, rather than trying to run a bunch of other drugs to combat symptoms from a drug, just don't use it. I mean, that's a simple equation. I don't use it anymore. On occasion, I'll use it on spot duty. It is my favorite for mass, but in working with people and talking with people, nandrolone seems to be 50-50. Some people have no problem with it, and other people, it completely wrecks them. They end up with anxiety, they end up with impotence, erectile dysfunction, sex drive issues, all sorts of problems. I still love nandrolone for size. For me, nothing beats nandrolone for size. I found nothing else that puts size on me like nandrolone. But it's just not worth the cost of admission right now with the anxiety. I tried running it on my most recent cycle, and I got about 6 weeks into it, and I just couldn't take it anymore, and I had to drop it. So maybe I'll give it another run at some point, but right now I'm running Test and Primo exclusively. And I find that with Test and Primo, I don't have any problems. All right, next question is from Rick. I think it's Noce, N-O-C-E, 79. Rick, I apologize if I've slaughtered your name here. He's asking, Masteron versus Primobolan. Could you replace Primobolan with Masteron? What is considered the minimal effective dose for both? Yeah, you could replace. They're both DHT-derived steroids. Masteron and Primobolan are cousins. They're very similar to each other in action, and if you look at molecularly, they're very similar. In theory, Primobolan is more anabolic than Masteron. I found that Masteron seems to be better for sex drive and aggression. Primobolan seems to be better for muscle mass. The differences between the two probably is not much. But if I had to pick one or the other, I'm running Primobolan all day. Primobolan right now is my favorite anabolic. It seems to be most guys that have been at this for a while tend to lean towards Primobolan. That's the drug that they tend to lean towards as their primary anabolic. So effective dose, I don't know what to tell you other than find one that works for you. I usually run it at somewhere between 80 to 100% of my testosterone dose. So whatever that is. All right, next question here from Shreddy Fox 7845. Do you think The Rock's cheat days would be sustainable for the average lifter? If you guys have seen The Rock, he posts some pretty epic cheat days. I think he does his cheat day on Sunday, if I remember, like his giant thing of pancakes or whatever it is that he has, or he has a tray full of cookies and stuff like that. Do I think it would be average for the sustainable lifter? Probably not. I'm assuming the type of diet that The Rock is doing, I think he works with Hani Rambad. Don't quote me on that. But I would assume the type of diet he's doing is probably a shit-loading diet, or I don't know if any of you are familiar with Skip Hill, but he runs that sort of diet where it's essentially keto or almost zero carb all week, and then you'll have a day where you just eat whatever you want, really. It's sort of a calorie cycling, carb cycling type of diet, only you can have a bunch of junk food on that day. And The Rock, you have to think he's got a lot of muscle mass, a lot more than what your average person does. So he's going to be able to melt through a lot more calories than your normal gym bro is doing. Clearly, he looks like he's running a fair amount of gear, I would say. Maybe not right now. He doesn't look as big as he was. And I would imagine his energy output is pretty high as well. He seems like he works out very hard. He's doing a lot of activity. I know with his movies, they're very physical, so he's probably doing a fair amount of physical activity. So I would say it's probably not the most optimal thing to do. Eating all that trash one day a week seems to be a bit of disordered eating to me. I don't know, but I mean, it works for him. And I would have to suspect that having all that trash food in one day a week is probably not the best for your long-term health. Although nothing we do in bodybuilding is really good for your long-term health. I don't think it would work that well for the average person. I have found that most people don't have the discipline to get back on track when they have a trash day. I have tried a trash loading, shit loading diet before, and my issue is once I'm off track, I am off track. If I have a bunch of junk food, I just don't want to eat regular food again. I start eating like shit. So there's the physiological aspect of it. There's the psychological aspect of it. I would say that it's probably not going to work for most people. The Rock seems like a very disciplined guy. I'm sure he can get right back on track the next day and be good the rest of the week. Most people aren't going to be. All right, next question here is from Chris K7693. I have a relatively high total cholesterol of 250 milligrams per deciliter and an LDL of 165. But at the same time, a pretty low E2 under 20 pg/ml. Is there a connection here? How can I increase my estrogen? I am a natural athlete and I've been eating super healthy for 6 months. Thanks. HDL is usually related to your estrogen being low. LDL is related to a crap diet. I would imagine probably the problem. Not that I don't consider 165 LDL. I don't know. That's not stupid high. I've seen some people with 400 LDLs. I think the normal range used to be 150. I don't know, but still, it should be lower. And my guess would be is you're eating too much saturated fat. I know a lot of natty guys have this delusion that they need to eat a bunch of saturated fat to keep their hormone production up. You only need something like 20 to 30 milligrams a day to keep your hormone production up, and it's really the conversion to LDL. LDL is the precursor to steroidal hormones, and clearly you have plenty of LDL. You don't need more fat to make LDL, so your LDL is high, plenty high, so you do not need any more cholesterol for hormone production. My guess, and I'm just taking a blind stab in the dark here, is that you're probably running some sort of keto or carnivore diets. That's usually when I see dudes with blown out HDLs, or LDLs, sorry, not HDLs. Usually when I see dudes with blown out LDLs, they're eating a carnivore or a keto diet that they think is healthy, and their lipids are all blown out of whack. So if you want to get that LDL down into a healthy range, I would lower your saturated fat intake, probably do some more cardio. Maybe you need something like some ezetimibe to help bring that down. But generally, LDL, I'm going to repeat it again, generally, LDL is diet related. HDL is related to estrogen being crushed or taking oral steroids. So there you go. Stop eating all that saturated fat, high-fat meats. It's usually high-fat meats. I can't tell you how many guys come to me and think that that a ribeye, eating ribeyes and 80-20 hamburger and bacon and chicken thighs are healthy. Keep your fats, keep your proteins as low in fat as you possibly can. Supplement with some EFAs. You don't need a ton of EFAs, but you need some. There are no essential saturated fats, only EFAs. So, all right. Moving on to the next question. Ashish 4408. A cutting cycle for pros versus a gaining cycle. I have a bunch of videos up about this. Most pros keep their off seasons very simple. The guys that I talk to, it's pretty much the same crap. It's testosterone. It's either Primobolan or equipoise. One or the other. And sometimes dudes will throw a little bit of nandrolone on top of that. HGH, insulin, maybe some IGF-1. That's a pro off-season cycle. They run the doses as high as they can tolerate. People don't want to hear that. Usually I see the total load somewhere in the 2 to 3 gram range, sometimes more, sometimes less. There are outliers on both ends of the spectrum, but I would say your average pro, most of your open class guys are going to be running higher amounts. Your men's physique guys, your classic physique guys are going to be the dudes that are running less because they don't need to weigh as much. That's a typical off-season. Going into contest prep, things shift. Usually you're going to drop the nandrolone, probably going to drop the insulin, at least on most days. Maybe on a high-carb day you'll leave it in. Probably going to drop the IGF-1, and then shift to more DHT-based things like Masteron, like Winstrol. You're probably going to have Trenbolone in there on contest prep. Halotestin's another option. That's when you throw the kitchen sink at it. And usually I see contest prep cycles. I think when people see these stupid cycles online and they assume that's what guys take year round, it's the contest prep cycles. And really, it's only the back half of the contest prep cycle. Usually moving into a contest prep, like your first half or first third of your contest prep is just going to be your off-season compounds, maybe with some fat burners thrown in. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Fat burners are going to get thrown in there. Typical fat burners you see are going to be things like clenbuterol, like ephedrine, caffeine, yohimbine, it's T3. I mean, those are things you're going to see. And usually it ramps up as you go towards the contest. And that's really the difference between the two. Coage, pharma versus generic HGH. I've gotten asked this one so many times now. I have always been a generic HGH guy. My thought process is it's either 191 amino acids or it is not. There's no varying degrees of 191 or not. You can argue the quality of it, the potency, I guess, whether or not it retains its potency. There's some other factors that go into it too, but it's either 191 or it's not. Although now I am starting to shift my belief a little bit. Every pro I have talked to swears by pharma. It seems like most of the pros I talk to run Serostim. That seems in high doses, higher than I thought. That's one that I've kind of evolved my belief process on. I thought guys were running less than they were, but they're actually running quite a bit more. But I've only run pharma a couple times, and I have seen zero difference in my IGF-1 levels between that and generic. I personally run generic. I know several pros that run generic. I know some guys that run the pharma. The issue with the pharma stuff is it's so expensive. Like, who can afford that? Who can spend $3,000-$4,000 a month on HGH? I'm not going to spend that much on HGH. So I think that's the limiting factor. Obviously, if you can afford it, pharma is probably going to be preferable. You know that it's going to be made with some quality control. It probably hasn't been degraded in shipping. So I think that's a lot of times where the belief that pharma is better comes from, because pharma hasn't been sitting in a hot shipping container coming across the Atlantic, or the Pacific, sorry, and hasn't degraded. So if the quality of the powder has degraded, then your 10 units might actually be 3. It's not that the HGH is any worse. It's just that it's degraded from the heat. So that's my thought on pharma versus generic HGH. Matt Gerard, 96, asked me, what is my water and sodium manipulation protocol on peak week? I do not mess with sodium. I don't know why guys mess with sodium. Every time I've ever seen anybody do any sort of sodium manipulation on peak week, you end up just looking worse. Maybe a little more salt on show day, eating a few more salty foods to help vacuum wrap you, but there is a rebound effect from that. It works for a few hours. If you have a morning prejudging and an evening finals, you may not want to do that. You may want to save your salty meal before finals. I keep things simple. I don't mess with the sodium intake. I keep the sodium intake static during peak week, and then maybe dump a little bit of water on the day before the show, or half a day before the show, going into the show day. Cut your water down to like 1/3 of what you normally would, or 1/4 of what you normally take, and just keep it simple. The more moving parts that you have going into the show, the more chance there is to screw something up. It's that simple. More parts, more problems. All right, my friend Relentless Fitness 7605 asked, the best way to develop your legs: more frequency, more intensity, more recovery, or a combo? What seems to be the best for growth and definition of legs? Well, definition is just purely a factor of diet. Training's not really going to change definition. It's just, you get leaner, you're going to have more definition. You gain body fat, and you're holding more water, you're going to have less definition. It's purely that simple. It's just a matter of body composition. For size on legs, I have completely rethought my beliefs on leg training. I used to be a squats guy, the squats exclusively, squats and heavy leg presses. That's all I ever did for legs. And I had zero hamstring development. I had zero glute development. My quads were okay. And when I stopped doing squats and I started separating my legs into varying workouts. So I have 2 leg workouts I do. I do a quad focused workout where I use hack squats with leg extensions, leg curls in there as well, but leg extension, maybe some lunges or some split squats. I don't think you can beat hack squats. Heavy, full range of motion, higher rep. I think most people go too heavy on legs. They do not get enough range of motion, and their leg development suffers for it. So you need full range of motion. You need a weight you can handle. I found that the 12 to 15 rep range is probably best for leg development. And higher volume, splitting your workouts in half. So I like I said, I have a quad focused workout and I have a hamstring, adductor, and glute focused workout. So for my hamstring, adductor, glute focused workout, what I will do is my hamstring exercises. I do one a leg curl and then the other some sort of stiff legged deadlift. I will do some sort of wide stance, either leg press or pendulum squat. For my adductors, I will do the adductor machine for my adductors as well, and then maybe some sort of butt blaster or whatever, hip thrust, whatever for the glutes. And people just lump their legs all into one big body part. There's multiple muscle groups there you have to work. I consider quads as a group. I consider adductors as a group. I consider hamstrings as a group. I consider glutes as a group. So if you want full leg development, you have to treat each body part separately and have exercises that specifically target those body parts in the ideal rep range, which to me is 12 to 15 reps with full range of motion, and get a good squeeze and a good contraction, and your legs will grow. B Hot Wagner 1 asked me, what's the average estradiol range you like to be in? Mine is usually high, but no noticeable side effects. Blood work usually shows in the mid 100s. Could this affect getting super lean? Yes, having high estradiol will affect getting super lean. You're going to have more of a watery, puffy look when your estradiol is high, at least in my experience. On contest prep, I usually will have to bury estradiol to get super lean. I know there's some people that will disagree with that and say that you need some estrogen for fat burning. I have found the opposite to be true. I found there are some estrogenic fat deposits that you need, if you need to get rid of them, things like love handles in your chest fat, that you need to really bury estrogen to get rid of those. So those days, when I'm on prep, towards the second half of my prep, once I get the easy fat off, I will bury my estrogen. In the off season, on the opposite hand, estrogen is anabolic. Estrogen is also cardioprotective. Estrogen is also neuroprotective. So I try to let my estrogen ride as high as I can tolerate in the off season without having gyno, without being emotional, without having soreness or puffiness in my breast tissue. And for me, I don't, if I'm below 60, I'm pretty good. If I get above 60, I start having problems. Everybody's different. But I found the way I modulate my estrogen in the off season is to not run an aromatase inhibitor in the off season. I just stack my testosterone with Primobolan somewhere between 80 to 90% of my testosterone dose, and that puts my estrogen in a nice range, and I feel great at that dose. My friend Tommy McGivern, this is not really a question, it's a statement. Tommy says, Big Paul, how can you get the message through to people that everything is individual dependent? People asking about numbers, specifically dosages, reps, even macros and protein amounts. It's 2023, and people are still asking me how much. The previous question, they were just asking me what estradiol range is ideal. It depends on what you respond to. I will tell you this, with my clients, I usually have certain numbers I start off with, and we vary and adjust from there. I have an idea where people are going to be, and then it gets way off course from my initial. I used to have macros and dosages that I would put together for people, and I found that everybody's different. Certain people can tolerate certain things, other people can't. Some people can get lean on eating 300 grams of carbs a day. Other people get fat. Some people only need to do 20 or 30 minutes of cardio on contest prep. Other people need to do an hour and a half. It varies wildly from person to person. It almost makes no sense because part of me is just like, I have a degree in computer science. I have an engineer's brain. I think like a software or network engineer. And the numbers should bear out. But the human body is a very complex organism with many, many variables. Hormones vary but from person to person. Muscle mass varies. Metabolic rates vary from person to person. How they digest and process their food varies. So there's so many variables. How they react to certain hormones, what tolerances they have, what health issues they have. There's so many variables you have to account for. So you really, like when coaching people, really it takes me a couple months, sometimes even longer, to figure out what I can and can't do with some people. I've had some people, it's like, for example, I was just thinking of a guy I worked with a rebound from contest prep. I have one person that will just grow like a weed from eating a ton of carbs after contest prep, and other people that'll blow up like a water balloon and look like shit. So we sort of have to figure that out on the fly, what we can get away with. So, Tommy, you are right. Everybody is different. You have to find out what works for your body and adjust accordingly. All right, folks, that's all I got for you today. If you want to support me, support my sponsor, First Detachment Nutrition. Quality supplements formulated by the man himself, Justin Harris. Check them out at firstdetachment.com. Use the discount code AB10 for 10% off at checkout. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for watching. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.